You've definitely heard of Rosa Parks. But what if I told you that before her, a 15-year-old girl refused to give up her seat? Her name was Claudette Colvin, and for decades, her story of incredible courage was pretty much lost to history. Let's talk about how one teenager's defiance helped kickstart a whole movement.
And wow, her family, they really said it best, didn't they? This wasn't just about one single act on one single day. We're talking about a lifetime of courage. This started when she was just a kid, and yeah, it really did help change the course of American history.
So we just recently got the news that Claudette Colvin passed away at the age of 86. And it's always tough when we lose a pioneer, but it also gives us a really important reason to look back and rediscover the incredible life she lived and the earth-shattering stand she took when she was just a girl.
Because it's so easy to just see her as a name in a history book, right? But to her family, she was so much more. They talked about her being wise, fiercely resilient, and just grounded in her faith. That's as much a part of her legacy as anything else.
Okay, so to really understand that legacy, we have to go back in time, all the way back to the moment it all began. A single spontaneous act from a teenager who just refused to be invisible.
So picture this. We're in Montgomery, Alabama. The date is March 2nd, 1955. Now get this. This is a full 9 months before Rosa Parks' famous protest that really galvanized the nation. On this day, history was made not by a seasoned activist, but by a high school student just trying to get home. Claudette Colvin was first.
And she was just 15 years old, a teenager. Can you just take a second and imagine the kind of conviction it took for a 15-year-old black girl in the segregated South of the 1950s to look the whole system in the eye and say no?
So she was on the bus, sitting right where she was legally allowed to sit in the colored section. But the bus filled up. A young white woman was left standing, and the driver ordered Colvin and 3 other students to get up and move to the back. The other students did. Claudette didn't.
And her own words tell you everything about her mindset. This wasn't just some random outburst. It was a thought-out moral stand. She saw another young woman not that different from herself, and in that moment, she just refused to accept the injustice of a law that said one of them was better than the other.
So what happened next? Her defiance wasn't met with praise, it was met with handcuffs. She was arrested, and the consequences of that day would follow her for the rest of her life. Civil rights leaders at the time actually considered making her case a flashpoint, but in the end, they decided against it. They thought a pregnant, unwed teenager was just too controversial to be the face of the movement.
She was literally dragged off that bus and hit with a whole bunch of charges, disturbing the peace, breaking the segregation law, and, the most serious one, assaulting a police officer. The system came down on her, and it came down hard.
Now, 2 of those charges were eventually dropped, but the assault charge? That one stuck. So, for the crime of refusing to be treated like a second-class citizen, this 15-year-old girl was officially branded a criminal.
For 66 years. Just let that sink in. For more than 6 decades, that conviction from when she was a kid just hung over her life like a shadow.
But that criminal record, that's not the end of her story. Not even close. In fact, it was really the beginning of a long and often overlooked fight for justice, not just for her, but for everybody.
So even though she wasn't the face of the boycott, she was still fighting. Just a year after her arrest, her powerful testimony became a cornerstone of Browder v. Gayle. That's the landmark Supreme Court case that finally declared bus segregation unconstitutional. And then, decades later, she took one final step to reclaim her own story.
At 82 years old, she walked back into an Alabama courthouse. And this is the moment. This is her, formally filing the paperwork to get her juvenile record wiped clean, seeking that personal justice she'd been denied since she was a teenager.
Her words afterward just say it all about her resilience, don't they? I'm no longer a juvenile delinquent at 82. After more than 6 decades of carrying that label, of being dismissed and forgotten, she was finally officially free. What a powerful, long overdue moment.
So what does her full legacy look like? Well, beyond that one pivotal day, she lived a full life. And in her later years, her message for the future became crystal clear.
For decades, she lived a pretty quiet life, out of the spotlight. She worked for 30 years as a nurse's aide, raised her 2 sons in New York. But in 2021, the recognition she had been denied for so long finally started to find her. She got national attention, a call from the vice president, and there's even a film about her life coming out.
But why go back and revisit all that painful history after so many years? Well, the answer wasn't really about her own vindication. It was about the truth she wanted to leave for the next generation, for her family.
She wanted her grandkids to know the real story. Their grandmother was not the delinquent. She was a young American who understood her constitutional rights and had the breathtaking courage to demand them, not just for herself, but for everyone who came after her.
You know, Claudette Colvin's life is more than just a history lesson. It's a challenge. Her story asks us what it takes to stand up for what's right, especially when you're young, when people dismiss you, and when you might have to stand all alone. So what does her legacy inspire in you?